Football at 4, you can set your watch by it. We're talking pigskin. We're talking football at 4 o'clock. Also at 4 o'clock, it's time for another addition to our keywords. This hour's keyword in our Sin City Skateaway is shot, S-H-O-T. Our 4 o'clock keyword in our Sin City Skateaway is shot, S-H-O-T. Of course, our Sin City Skateaway is sponsored by Park MGM Las Vegas, Newcomb & Company, and Buffalo Brothers. So text SHOT to 919-860-5326 before 5 o'clock. This keyword is good just for the 4 to 5 o'clock hour, so until 5 o'clock. Text SHOT to 919-860-5326. Enter for a chance to win a trip for two to Vegas to see Carolina play Vegas hockey. You get $400 in food credits. You get a luxurious room at the Park MGM Las Vegas, and obviously the round-trip flights. It's all part of our Sin City Skateaway. This hour's word, SHOT. Text it in to 919-860-5326. Now let's talk football.
I was just going to say, while you're out in Vegas, you can look at the odds that you can look at what the odds are for the Carolina Panthers to still have a chance of making the playoffs. I don't know if I'd want to take them personally.
I was going to say, I don't think so. I don't think – here I want to be clear here. I'm not having the conversation right now on if the Panthers are going to make the playoffs. I think that answer is no. However, were we actually wrong, those of us that discussed the possibility of the playoffs during this past offseason? Right? Because, I do hear you, by the way. Everyone out there, all of you listening, I hear you. I listen to you. If you tweet at me at Donnelly Sports, I hear it. If you comment on our YouTube page, we usually have people monitoring it, which you can follow along, like, subscribe, all that sort of thing, at 99.9 The Fan on YouTube. Right? I listen. And anytime we post something semi-critical or very critical, or maybe a better word for it is very honest about the Panthers, there is a response of, this people on your network, this podcast from The Fan talked about the Panthers in the playoffs this offseason. Now they want to act like they're all bad and nothing's good. I want to be clear on this. Nobody talked about the playoffs and Panthers in the same sentence because anyone thought the Panthers were good. You talked the Panthers and playoffs in the same sentence because you thought the division was that bad.
Yeah.
Right? It's no one's finishing first in the NFC, but you might finish fourth to last in the NFC, and that happens to be good enough for a playoff spot because the 3 teams below you also were in the NFC South. That's where the question came from. That's where the discussion started. There are right now no teams, none, in the division over 500. There is not a winning team in the NFC South. The Saints are leading the division at 5-5 and leaking oil. They had Jameis Winston out there doing the Jameis Winston thing this weekend, which it was equal parts awesome and terrifying, right? 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions.
Vintage Jameis Winston.
Some bad interceptions and also one of the craziest decisions to throw a pass I've ever seen in my life, where he is rolled out all the way to the left on like the 15-yard line and throws a jump ball on the right sideline in the end zone, and it was complete for a touchdown. Like, there's no way to explain any of this. The Saints are leading the division. Michael Thomas might be hurt again. Alvin Kamara was suspended. Chris Olave a couple weeks ago had a ball that should have been a touchdown bounce off his helmet. They've looked like the bad news Bears, and I'm not talking about like grazed it. I'm talking about like
boing.
Little Giants should have been, yeah, exactly. Should have had a boink sound effect. Tampa Bay and Atlanta are both 4-6. The Panthers have 1 win, so they're definitely the worst of the bunch. Don't get me wrong, but answer this question. It's a fill in the blank. Well, let's Mad Libs it real quick.
Okay.
You do it yourself in your car or wherever you are. The Panthers are 4 games out of first place in the division. But if they had competent blank, they'd be in the mix. I think there's like 5 or 6 answers there.
I automatically want to say play calling.
Offensive play calling. Off-season free agency moves, right? If maybe you take that $7 million a year that you gave to Miles Sanders and that $7 million a year that you gave to Hayden Hurst and spend it a little bit differently. Can you find 2 wins? If you have 3 wins right now, you're in the mix for a playoff spot. If you have 2 more wins, if you keep the win against Houston, which I'm not attributing to like the awesome play calling, and you find 2 wins, you're in the mix, right? And heck, if one of those 2 wins you find was the game earlier this season against the Saints, then all you do is find 2 more wins, and you're only 1 game out of the playoffs and getting better. If they had competent game management, did they steal one? If they have competent
leadership,
do they just?
And I'm not talking about Frank Reich. I'm talking about upper management.
Oh, all the way up top.
Yeah.
Or heck, sometimes it's the on-field. Like if they took $14 million that they didn't give to Miles Sanders and Hayden Hurst and gave it to a veteran, solid offensive lineman.
Okay. $14
million is going to get you one of the best guards on the market. Put him next to Ike Ekwonu. Does that help Ike Ekwonu? Does that solidify the interior of the offensive line? Does that give Bryce Young a little bit more time to make 7 throws that are the difference? Were we actually wrong for acting like the playoffs were a possibility, or was it actually a possibility? They just botched the basics that they needed to take advantage of that opportunity. Right? Like, I don't care how bad of a basketball team you are. If you have a 3-on-1 fast break, it's got to be a possibility that you score. Now, if you dribble it off your foot or you throw it off the side of the head of the guy you're in a fast break with, oh, you didn't score, and it looks like you never had a chance. But 3-on-1 has to be a possibility. This division is terrible. It is terrible. And by the way, they started hot, right? After like 2 or 3 weeks, they were basically the only losses they suffered were at the hands of each other and Carolina. Like Carolina was always the losing. But they were 6-0 at one point in time. The other players, the other teams. Now none of them are above 500. So they're leaking oil. They're getting worse. If the Panthers had competent blank, they would have been in the postseason race, and the blank could be filled in with a bunch of different things. That is why the conversation in the playoffs came up. It had nothing to do with, I think they're going to be world beaters, or, I think they could, win a bunch of playoff games. That's not to say they couldn't win any, right? Because, getting the dance, anything can happen. Ball bounces funny ways. But I would never put them in a conference championship conversation. I never put them in a Super Bowl conversation. I wouldn't expect them to make it out of wild card weekend. But the only thing standing between, I should say, the Panthers of this past offseason and the playoffs are the Saints, who are getting worse, are Tampa Bay, who's getting worse, and Atlanta, who might be getting better if they decide they actually want to give the ball to Bijan Robinson. But who knows? If they had competent blank offensive play calling, if they had competent free agency moves, if they had competent in-game management, if they had just a couple different players, would everything have gone differently? And I'm not saying everything like, would they be seven wins? I'm saying, could they have 3? Is there a world where the Panthers have 3 wins? Right now they have 1. I'm not asking for the sun, the moon, and the stars. I'm asking for 2 wins. Couple different decisions, right? The sliding doors moments. Heck, they signed Andy Dalton like the first day of free agency, whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if they signed a different veteran. Maybe they win that game in Seattle. That's 1. Like, do you realize how easy it is for this team to find 2 wins? And if one of them's against the Saints, they're 1 game out of the postseason. I'm not sure it was wrong to have that conversation. I think it's wrong to assume we had that conversation because the Panthers were going to be awesome. If you looked at that roster and said, hey, they're going to be awesome, that's a problem. If you looked at that roster and said, maybe they could be the least bad of these other bad teams if a few things break their way, maybe. Right? You need to get some breaks. Probably needed Bryce Young to play a bit better. But you make a few different decisions, maybe he gets a little bit more help to play better. Were we actually wrong for acting like the playoffs were a possibility for the Panthers? Looking at how the division is set up now, I don't know if we were all that wrong.